Welcome to this episode of How the Game Was Won. And we're looking at Game 3 of the FIDE World Cup finals for 2015. And who would have thought that 3 games into the final at classical time control, we would have 3 decisive games. Most unusual for chess at this type of caliber to have so many decisive games. But without further ado, let's see what happened. Today we had Peter Svidler with the white pieces, and Sergey Karjakin was playing black. And as you know, so far in the match, Sergey Karjakin is 2-0 down, and all Svidler needs to do in Game 3 is to secure a draw, and he wins the match. So for Karjakin, it is a do-or-die, must-win game in order to be able to stay in the match at all. And when you absolutely have to play for the win, the Sicilian is the logical opening to choose. And I'm pretty sure that Svidler must have done his homework as far as that's concerned, expecting to be seeing the Sicilian defense coming through. And Svidler went for, didn't go for the main line, but it's certainly a good playable solid line. We've got 6 Queen E3, Knight F6, H3, G6, Knight C3, Bishop G7, Bishop E2, Knight D7, and sort of transposing back along mainline variations. In this situation, for instance, castling kingside or black castling kingside would have been straight back into mainline variations. We got Rook B1, Knight D to E5. We've got castle short and castle short. And it's very much of a Maroczy-bind type of structure being developed here. And as far as the Maroczy-bind structures is, white is trying to prevent black from creating any counterplay, which Karjakin obviously desperately needs. And for this reason, black chooses to put his pieces in such a way to allow for an early breakout of, for instance, playing F5, even if it weakens his position. Because if you look, for instance, should black be playing something like F5, you're going to be sitting with these gaping holes behind the F4. But the only way for black to be able to create counterplay and a direct attack developing down towards the white king as soon as possible is that he'll need to take these type of risks. We continue with Rook D1, Knight F3 check, Bishop takes F3, F5, he takes F5, Bishop takes F5, and Bishop E4. Now, the more pieces are traded off, the happier Svidler is, because the fewer pieces on the board, the less possibility there is for Karjakin to create serious complications and pressure on the white position. And continue with Queen D7, Knight D5, Queen E6, Bishop takes F5, Queen takes F5, Bishop D2, Rook A to E8, and Bishop C3. Still trying to, obviously, white is still trying to trade pieces here, because that's what's helping. Each piece trade helps white's position along just a little bit more. But for instance here, instead of Bishop C3 with the option of trading of pieces, we had the option of, this is Queen E1 with E6, Knight E3, Queen F7 and Knight G4. Again, trying to trade off the piece then on the H6 square. But the game continued from Bishop C3 with E6, Knight B6, D5, Bishop takes on G7, King takes on G7 there. White's achieved his trade off of the dark square bishops. Again, each trade strengthening black's position, white's position more and more. Queen C5, Rook F6, b4, knight e5, c takes on d5, knight d3, queen e3. Now here, remembering that Karjakin is obviously needing to push as much as possible for the win, but he plays knight f2, which on the face of it is not that brilliant a proposition, because quite simply, as far as the alternatives were concerned, the alternatives would have been forcing Karjakin to trade off queens, which he absolutely can't afford to do. Rook fe1, queen e4, rook b to e1. For instance, here rook f to e1 would have been stronger for Svidler to play, with e takes d5, queen takes f2, rook takes f2, achieving the exchange of queens, rook takes e4, and or for that matter say queen takes e4, knight takes e4, rook f6, king takes f6, d takes e6, king takes e6, and this gives black a slight edge in the endgame. But getting back to the game at hand, we've got rook b to e1, and here black plays e takes d5, and in this position white should have played something along the lines of, for instance, queen c3, because after queen c3 the black simply loses material, and the variations are not even particularly difficult to calculate, because what you've got here is, for instance, you've got the, just from a structural point of view, you've got this pin against the king going on there. You've got so with the pin against the king going on, the knight on f2 is no longer protected. You've got the queen pinned against the rook on that side, so the queen needs to move out of the way, in which case the black rook falls, and then shortly after that the black knight falls. So it's just all comes crashing down. But instead of playing something like queen c3, Svidler plays rook takes on f2, which allows queen h4, and here again the option that Svidler had at his disposal was to play something along the lines of queen takes f8, so queen takes on e8, queen takes on e2, king h2, queen b6, rook e7, king h6, and rook d7, which will probably end in a draw, because black's king is in too much of a weakened position to be able to force the win. But instead of doing that, Svidler uncorks queen d2, and after queen d2 it just allows the rook comes bang straight down onto f2, and white is just simply white is absolutely lost in this position, because the rook on e1 is obviously just hanging, because if if black plays, for instance, queen takes on f2, then all that happens is that, let me just show you quickly, if should queen take on f2, then all that happens is the rook comes down and nails e1 with check. The king will then need to move, for instance, to h2, and that will allow the black queen to come down and take the white queen, and it will be rook and queen down. So the game continued with white playing queen, queen c3 check, and after d4, white is simply down masses of material. The rook on e1 is going to be falling, the queen on c3 is on free, and it's just an absolute mess as far as white's concerned, and there's even the possibility of a mating attack with the queen coming across to the f4 square as well. So with this position, Svidler resigned the game. The match moves to 2-1 to Svidler. Svidler now has the black pieces for the fourth and final classical game, and again it's a game that Karjakin needs to win in order to save the match. So that, my friends, is how the game was won, or in this case, once again, how the game was lost. How Peter Svidler managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Feel free to share this video out amongst your chess friends. Don't forget to click the thumbs up button if you like this type of content, thumbs down if not, that way I know what to be putting out in the future. And also, if you're watching this video within the YouTube channel, remember to click the big red subscribe button that you see below the screen. That way you stay subscribed to my channel for all of the new material that will be coming out to you on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. Stay safe out there, stay carved up for the win, and I'll see you next time for another edition of How the Game Was Won. Until then, cheers.